Good day, everyone. My name is Jose Alexius Florentino, and I'm going to report about the Module 4. For the Module 4, we emphasize the job hazard analysis. So, what is a job hazard analysis? Job hazard analysis is a technique that focuses on job tasks as a way to identify hazards before they cause harm to people in the workplace. The analysis focuses on the relationship between the worker, the task, the tools, the materials, and the work environment. So, why conducting job hazard analysis is important? Conducting job hazard analysis is important because it can help prevent workplace injuries and illnesses by looking at your workplace operations, establishing proper job procedures, and ensuring that all employees are trained properly. It is one of the best ways to determine and establish proper work procedure. Steps in conducting GHA. Step 1, select the job processes to analyze. Step 2, list the steps. Step 3, describe the hazards. Step 4, recommend control measures. 5, write the safe job procedure. 6, review or improve the GHA. To emphasize the step 1, which is selecting job processes to analyze, you may want to give priority to the job processes like jobs with the highest injury or illness rates, jobs where there have been close calls where an incident occurred but no one got hurt, like jobs where you have identified violations of OSHA standards, then jobs with the potential to cause serious injuries or illness even if there's no history such problems, jobs in which one simple human mistake could lead to severe injury, and jobs that are new to your operation or have been changed, and jobs complex enough to require written instructions. For step 2, listing the steps of job processes. Here's the example. You can watch the worker do the job and list each step in order. Begin each step with a verb. For example, turn on the saw. Uh, you can go on. Uh, you must not make it too broad or too detailed. Uh, you just have to make it simple and comprehensive. You may want to photograph or videotape to present it to the involved workers. For instance, we can review the steps with the worker and other workers who do the same job to make sure you have not left anything out. Step 3, in describing the hazard, prepare to answer the following. Whether if what can go wrong, what are the consequences, what could it happen, how could it happen, what are the contributing factors that influence the hazards, how likely is at how likely is it that the hazard will occur. In step 4, in recommending control measures, you must use the following as a guide. Safer way to do the job, describe each step, be specific, don't use generalizations like be careful. Equipment changes or engineering control are the first choice because they can eliminate the hazard. For example, machine guards, improve lighting, better ventilation. Changes in work processes, administrative control, or changes in how the task is done can be used if engineering controls aren't possible. For example, rotating jobs, changing the steps, and training. And then changes in personal protective equipment, When engineering and administrative controls aren't possible or do not adequately protect the workers, use personal protective equipment. Good examples are gloves and hearing protection. For the step 5, in writing safe job procedures, you can correct the unsafe conditions and processes like train all employees who do the job on the changes and make sure they understand the changes. And lastly, in reviewing and improving GHA, you must periodically find the hazards you missed before. When the task or process is changed, when injuries or close calls occur when doing the task. Uh, for the work environment monitoring, it is to ensure healthy working environment. There must be monitoring in the workplace through systematic surveillance of the factors in the working environment to determine health hazards in the workplace which are not seen during inspection. Uh, it is to prevent injuries, illness, and death. A work environment monitoring is required to identify and assess hazardous substances that the workers may be exposed and adversely affect their health. Work environment measurement, or WEM. It is the determination of environmental hazards, stresses, and their hazardous effect on workers' health by directly measuring hazards through sampling and analysis of the atmospheric working environment and other fundamental elements of working environment for the purpose of determining actual conditions. WEM is a useful tool of accomplishing the following: to determine compliance to threshold limit values, to determine work-related workers' diseases, to assess magnitude of harmful substances in the environment, monitor exposure of workers to harmful substances, and evaluate effectiveness of control measures. Industrial hygiene. It is an overview of the elements of industrial hygiene and its approach help in understanding WEM. The IH, or industrial hygiene, involves 4 stages. Stage 1, anticipation of potential risk. Stage 2, recognition of health hazards. Stage 3, evaluation of magnitude of the hazards. Stage 4, control measures. So, method of environmental monitoring. Uh, 1. First, exposure or personal monitoring. Second, biological monitoring. Third, work environment monitoring. So here's the WIM process. First, we must conduct walkthrough survey of the area. Second, identify and prepare the appropriate measuring equipment. Third, conduct the WIM. Fourth, analyze samples and evaluate the results. Fifth, evaluate existing control measures and recommend improvement. For the analysis of the results, uh, resulting data of measurements are evaluated against existing value standards published by standard bodies for the most common threshold limit values. TLVs are the maximum average airborne concentration of the hazardous materials to which healthy adult workers can expose during an 8-hour workday and 40-hour work week. Over a working lifetime, without experiencing significant adverse health effects, we must refer to the ACGIH, or American Conference of Government Industrial Hygiene, or Table 8 of OSH standards. For the components of TLB, there are three. First, time weighted average. Second, selling value. Third, short-term exposure limit, or still value. For the OSH inspection, it is a structured walkthrough of a workplace or facility to identify hazards, verify compliance with standards, and evaluate safety performance. It is an excellent way to reference the commitment to safe work practices and provide a systematic method for involving supervisors, employees, safety coordinators, and safety committees in the process of eliminating workplace hazards. So, why OSH inspection important? OSH inspections are important as they allow you to first listen the concerns of the workers and supervisors. Second, gain further understanding of jobs and tasks. And lastly, you can identify existing and potential hazards. Conducting inspection. The inspection should be carried out according to the written procedure of the company and aided by the checklist. It includes the following. First, planning the inspection route. Second, observing tasks being done. Third, asking questions. And lastly, making notes, etc. For reporting findings, identified hazard must be classified using the hazard classification system. Its purpose is to ensure the hazard are addressed by priority depending on the urgency and level of risk. So in this table we have the classification, description, and recommended action. For the major hazards, which is type A, its description is likely to cause permanent disability, loss of life and properties. Recommended action for this this corrective action needed immediately. For the classification, serious hazard, or the type B, its description states that this hazard is likely to cause serious injury, temporary disability, or property damage. Recommended actions are corrective action needed within days. Minor class, for the classification minor hazard, which is the class C, it is the hazard likely to cause minor or non-disabling injury, non-disruptive to property damage. Recommended action, corrective action needed on long to medium term. For the follow-up and monitoring, OSH inspection teams are duty bound to check if proposed corrective actions were done and results are effective. It is for improvement and can be viewed as the cycle of planning, doing, checking, and acting. For the hazard control, effective controls must be in place to help prevent accidents and illnesses after hazards are identified and assessed for risk. For the system to control hazards can be controlled at the source, at the path, and the receiver. For the primary hazard controls, there are the components, uh, which is the hazard control and exposure control. And for the hierarchy of controls, it is stated to uh, in order or in level. Level 1, which is the elimination. Level 2 for the substitution. Level 3 engineering. Level 4 administrative. Level 5 personal protective equipment. To emphasize, the hierarchy starts with the controls, which is the level 1 and perceived to be the most effective, and moves down to those considered less effective as defined by us. It flows as follows. For the level 1, which is elimination, it mainly means to physically remove the hazard. For the level 2, which is the substitution, it is to replace the hazard. Level 3, engineering controls, it states that we must isolate people from the hazard. For the level 4, administrative controls, administration can change the way people work. And lastly, for the level 5, personal protective equipment, it provides and protect worker by the use of the PPEs, or personal protective equipment. For the hazard control, uh, hazard control are focused on the source of the hazard. Engineering methods are used to control the hazard, and the following are the engineering methods used. There are the substitution, design, enclosure, barriers, and ventilation. For the exposure control, it is focused on the employees exposed to hazards. Administrative management methods are used to control exposure, like practices, procedures, schedules, and safety signages. Safety signages or warning safety signs. Visual alerting device. It is a visual alerting device in the form of a label, placard, or other marking. Its purpose is to advise the observer or the nature and degree of potential hazards. Uh, for us, we must refer to the ANSI, or the American National Standard Institute. So here are the following: safety signs and labels, color codes, safety symbols. Its codes are indicated beside it. Refer to the OSH standards, table 11, standard colors and dimension. So we can see here, safety signs have 3 panels and 4 components, which are the safety alert symbols, which is above the signboard, located above the signboard, together with the signal word. And symbol was indicated beside with the message. For the standard color of signs, safety red, color red for the safety, which means for the fire protection. It is to call attention to fire protection equipment, apparatus, and facilities like fire extinguishers, pumps, buckets, hose, hydrant. For the safety green, is to designate safety, which state that location of first aid equipment, location of safety devices, safety bulletin boards, and other standard color of signs and its indication are written below. Uh, where are signages are needed? Signages are needed for the usage of PPEs prior to entry to the work site, and when potential risk of falling object was there, potential risk of falling, explosiveness, flammable substances are used or stored, etc. So here's the criteria of good signage and marking. Conspicuous, clear, comprehensible, readable, and consent. For the personal protective equipment or clothing worn to minimize exposure to hazard that cause serious workplace injuries and illness, which may result from contact with chemical, radiological, physical, electrical, mechanical, or other workplace hazards. It includes gloves, safety glasses, and shoes, earplugs or mops, hard hats, respirators, coveralls, vests, and full body suits. So, when are the PPEs necessary? Uh, Employers must provide personal protective equipment to workers when engineering work practices and administrative control strategies are not feasible or do not provide sufficient protection. So, for the hazard identification, risk assessment, and determination control or HIRAC, it is a tool used to identify hazards in the work area or in work activities to perform risk assessment and determine and implement controls and to monitor and review effectiveness of such control. It is the heart of the occupational safety and health management system. Its goal is to seek answer to the following. For the hazard and the identification, it answered for the question what can happen, what are the possible consequences. For the RA, which is the risk assessment, it would likely to answer the questions like how likely will the consequences occur and how severe will the harm be. And for the determination control, DC, it answers the question what can be done to control the harm and are the controls effective. For the workplace assessment, OSH risk assessment is a process or method of assessing the likelihood of a risk factor to cause harm, illness to the worker, determining the severity of consequence of the risk factor of and rating OSH risk in terms of significance as basis for identifying control measures. So here's the HIRAC process. So here is the stated here is the step 1, which is the identify the hazard. Step 2, assess the risk. Step 3, evaluate the existing controls. Step 4, implement additional risk controls. And step 5, which is the last step, monitor and review. For the step 1, identifying the hazards and possible consequences. In this step, hazard is defined as the potential to cause injury, harm, or damage. It can be health or safety hazards. For the steps 2, which is the assess the risk, In these steps, risk is defined as the degree of uncertainty expressed in likelihood of the consequence to occur and the severity of the consequences if indeed it will occur. For the step 3, which is the evaluate existing risk controls, it states that there is a need to closely examine the existing risk controls and their effectiveness in controlling the risk at an acceptable level. The risk assessment team examines existing data of accidents, near misses, illness to determine if existing control measures are adequate. For the step 4, which is the implement additional risk controls, it states that if evaluation in step 3 finds that existing risk controls are not adequate as uh, I mean evidence by a significant residual risk, additional control measures shall be implemented as recommended in step 3. For the step 5, which is the monitor and review effectiveness of risk control, it is an ongoing process of risk evaluation, control implementation, monitoring and reviewing the effectiveness of the process. And there's the there's where my report ends, and thank you.